Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Law Essentials welcomes you to the 17th edition of the webinar on football agents, FIFA and beyond, a global discussion. Law Essentials is a student-run initiative by a group of inquisitive law students having a penumbral idea about the application of law in day-to-day life. I am Mohammed Farhan, founder at Law Essentials and publisher at Law Essentials Journal and a student at St. Joseph's College of Law, Bengaluru. It is fair to say that our lives in the 21st century are in many respects dominated by media and sport, and when combined, they are a very powerful force and mix indeed. The growing interaction between sports and law has created a new need for a greater understanding of how the law relates to the sporting world. Different from theoretical laws, sports law is pure law. Sports law is not only an applied law in the field of sports, physical education, and its related fields, but also a blend of laws in a number of jurisdictions. We have with us the guest speakers for today's session, Mr. Santiago Zambrano, an international sports lawyer, Mr. Victor Targino, lawyer of Santos Futebol Club, Mr. Pranay Kapuria, General Manager, Sporting Group International, Mr. Tarun, Assistant Professor Research, Gujarat National Law University, Ms. Apoorvi, an international sports lawyer, and Mr. Deepre, an international sports lawyer. Thank you so much to all the speakers for devoting your precious time to conduct this webinar. We are extremely honored for this opportunity.
Right.
I would request Deep sir to start ahead.
Right, Farhan. Thanks a lot for the introduction. I'm really excited to be a part of this session, which should be very interesting for people who are interested in the sports industry. So we read a lot about football transfers in the media, and from time to time we also read about these influential agents like Mino Raiola and Mendes. But I believe that very few of us have clarity regarding what football intermediaries actually do. So I would like to bring in Pranay, who works as an intermediary. So Pranay, maybe you could tell us what exactly the role of a football intermediary is and how intermediaries go about their business.
Yeah. Farhan, first of all, thank you for introducing and Deep for the introduction as well. Just a quick background. So basically, behind every football player you see on the screen in the modern game, you can be definitely sure that there is an agent pulling some strings behind the scene for any player, be it Sunil Chetri in India, to be it Neymar in Brazil, be it Gurpreet or be Rahul Beke, for example. Agents carry out a very important role in the background, trying to secure the best possible deal for the player or for the clients. It's because we are now living in the 21st century in the modern world. Negotiating contract is not the only thing which an agent does. The role has evolved over the years for any agent. So just not negotiating contracts, we also do sort of trying to get endorsement deals for the player, sponsorship deals for the player, organizing media appearances, trying to organize player interviews with the journalist, giving journalists an access to the players. Then in terms of this is in terms of playing, but the other than that, we provide financial guidance to the players, because what happens is a player starts earning from the age of 20 till, let's say, he might retire at the age of 33 or 34. So the earning capacity is only 12 to 13 years. The player has to earn all the money for his life in 13 to 14 years. So we need to guide them in terms of investment, where to invest the money during what you've earned, and life after football. So once tomorrow you hang up your boots, what career are you going to take? Are you going to go into coaching? Are you going to media? So that sort of role, it's a completely 360 career management of a person, not just a professional football player, in short.
Right. So as someone who's been working in the profession for a number of years, what do you think are the skills one must possess in order to become a successful intermediary?
I think the most important skills, I would say, is networking. You should have a good network and connection at various clubs. You should know the sporting director, have a good networking capacity to have a good connection so you can place the players into various clubs. And
Yeah.
second foremost is the communication and the negotiation power as well. You need to know how to communicate with the clubs. You just can't send a player name or a data or something. Like, you need to communicate it properly with the player, that why this player would be important for your team and what will the player bring to the table when he plays for your team. And the third part is in terms of negotiation, because that's the most important thing. Where if you can't negotiate, any contracts, you will be losing. You will be not be able to secure the best contracts for the player, because
Okay.
then if you're not able to negotiate, the club will have a major power and to pull, pull the financials in their favor rather than the player's favor. So I think these three: networking, communication, and negotiation. These three are the most important skill any aspiring intermediary or an agent who wants to get into the industry.
Right. Also, for the benefit of any aspiring intermediary who might be listening to us, is there any degree one could pursue, or a specific course which an aspiring agent could enroll for, which could help them gain knowledge about the industry one, and also enhance their practical skills, which you've spoken about at length?
I think there's no course out there in terms of professional course which someone can learn. Like, for example, let's say tomorrow, if you want to become a chartered accountant, you need
Mhm.
to do the exams of chartered accountancy. But to become a football agent, there is
Mhm.
no exam, so there is no course. It's up to your passion and knowledge.
Mhm.
That's what is required to be a football agent, because uh, before, back in the days, there were exams to become a certified football agent, but it's been
Okay.
scrapped by FIFA, so there is no exams to become an intermediary, basically, or any course.
So again, briefly, so how does
So,
one start a
any
career in?
aspiring, yeah. So
Yeah.
if any aspiring, I would say is start making contacts with the clubs and try making contacts with the player first. Try to get a contract with the player. Start speaking. Have the knowledge of the market which they are working in. Let's say if a person is
Yeah.
working in Indian football, should have a knowledge of Indian football, what's happening across the leagues, the clubs, what
Yeah.
financials out there. That is something. The knowledge of the local market is very important first and
Sure.
foremost, and then
Yeah.
trying to start establishing contacts with various clubs and the players to secure some deals. So
Right.
that is something. The most important thing is the knowledge of the local market.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Pranay. Over to you, Farhan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deep. I would request Miss Apoorvi to come forth now. Could you brief us about the history of FIFA agent regulations, its subsequent amendments, and give us an overview of the regulatory framework, ma'am? You are unmuted. You are muted, ma'am. You'll have to unmute to speak.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Law Essentials, for having me here. Um, so when we're talking about the regulatory framework, there are a couple of things that we have to keep in mind, that for even FIFA, when they were drafting these regulations, it was a learning curve for them. They were changing the regulations on intermediaries almost every fourth year, and which was usually done on the basis of the circulars that they receive, but then again, eventually they would be codified inside the regulations. One of the very striking the very first striking thing that you could see in the old regulations is the name in itself. The name of the regulations previously used to be Regulation Players Agent. So when you at a gist, the very first thing that comes in your mind is it's just going to be about these agents who will have anything to do with the players as their clients and not clubs, which was not really the case. And you could only see that if you go through those regulations, those rules through and through. So eventually, there was another circular that was released by FIFA clarifying the situation that no, players agent simply means that it's going to be agents with who are going to have clients which are either players or clubs. Now, the regulatory framework in general of FIFA is limited to two transactions that happen between different clients with agents. That is, either there is a transaction of employment contract, which would be straight up between a player and a club. And the second way is where there'll be a transfer. So there'll be two clubs involved. Either ways, initially, if you look into the language of the regulations, the 2008 one, recently amended in 2014. The 2008 regulations are really hefty. There are so many pointers within the agreement. The agreement is really long. The code is really long, and it was really very confusing because it had licensing regulations and then also the requirement for an agent to pass a test, and there were many more eligibility criteria that were set forth in it. And then in the amendment part, post amendment in 2014, they simplified the language. They simplified the language on the basis that they put the entire onus completely on the national associations. What they now set was a model regulation document, which is to be followed by each and every national association. And these standards that are provided within the FIFA regulations on intermediaries is going to be limited to these minimum standards. However, the national associations have the leeway of going above and beyond whatever the regulations are, basically giving a lot of onus, a lot of power, discretionary power for national associations to do it. For me, it makes sense that they did it at the initial stage, because when you're talking about agents, even for FIFA to keep a check on every agent by itself was pretty much impossible. So, in order to cut short the workload, they had to divide it to the national associations. But then the question that came up during this amendment by many of the lawyers of agents, particularly, was that there's a lot of confusion. Which association should we go and refer to? There were complications with regards to the difference in there was no unification of registration. So for each and every transaction that an agent is doing, for every change of national association, he had to get himself newly registered, which is still going on, and still national associations have their a lot of dominant position when it comes to transactions. This is one of the reasons why most of the agent related cases land up in national associations and then go to national courts. But we have to keep in mind that by virtue of FIFA statutes, coaches, agents, everybody who's related to football and FIFA are parties to FIFA. So because of Article 58 of FIFA statutes, agents still have an option of reaching CAS now. Earlier, agents did not have it. Agents could even reach FIFA if they could, but now they can reach directly CAS. So what my recommendations nowadays to all my agent clients is that, you have an option of CAS, choose the CAS option. Otherwise, you'll end up in really long proceedings, because there are 2-3 instances in every national association, and then you end up in ordinary courts, and then everybody knows that, especially for India, it's really time taking. And we are talking about transactions that are really quickly happening. Now, with regards to the registration, FIFA completely changed their standards, and they just concised it to a couple of minimum standards. I'm just going to read out them because they are all over the regulations. So I've just cut them down on pointers. I'm just going to read down what I've written. So first of all, you have to, whenever you're planning on being a party to a transaction, be it representing a player or club, you have to be registered. You have to be registered to the national association wherein your jurisdiction lies. Can be the old club if you're representing an old club in a transfer agreement, or the new club if you're representing the new club, or the player itself, and where the player is domiciled or the national of, which is usually the player's old club. So for him to get for an agent to be registered, the minimum standard is that you have to sign an intermediary declaration. This intermediary declaration and the form is available in Annex 1 and 2. Now, one more point is that earlier, the 2008 regulations did not recognize legal personalities as agents, which was changed. So that was again added, and there is another special form in Annex 2, which is specific to legal entities, basically agency companies. So after you submit the registration form to the registration system of the relevant national association, uh, you only then can start the transaction. So you have to wait, you have to give all the documents back to the National Association. Then the National Association will put it in its TMS database. FIFA will have a look at it. And national associations are obligated to keep on updating the agents list every now and then, so that FIFA always have an overview of what's happening around. And so there are different scenarios which can happen when an agent gets into a transaction. So if in case a transaction is between a player and a club, and the agent is representing a player, then it is the player who also has to submit the ID to his national association, his relevant national association. Now, if there is an agent who's engaged in a transaction representing a club, so the club and its national association, on behalf of the club, the ID of the agent will also be submitted. So this is how everything is regulatorily checked upon by FIFA. After you submit, when you are submitting the ID to the national associations, you also have to submit a representation contract. FIFA has specified very clearly in its regulations that when you are writing a representation contract, you have to expressly tell what kind of a transaction that agent is getting into, whether it's an employment contract between a player and a club, or it's a transfer. And if it is either ways, how much commission you are expecting, everything has to be accounted for, and everything has to be submitted to the National Association. Now, many people ask about the cap, because there is a 3% cap and a 10% cap that is given in the FIFA intermediary regulations. And people are always getting confused whether it's a fixed cap that you have to follow. So up till 2019, it was not really the case. It is still not really the case. But up till 2019, it has been suggested by CAS, and it has always been the jurisprudence of CAS, that this 3% or 10% cap in the commission of agents is just a recommendation by FIFA. So it's just going to be a recommendation by FIFA. You can land up to 15%, 20% if you want. But in my personal experience, on an average, I've seen majorly agents getting themselves 10% commissions. That's an average. The other point that is really interesting is the licensing. There have been instances earlier where even the competence of deciding the licensing systems by national associations like French Association was challenged to the ECJ, the European Court of Justice. And one of the main reasons was that FIFA cannot mandate an agent to get himself licensed via a test, because it just limits their ability to work within the European Union, which was eventually changed, as now we can see. But it has not really been changed, if you look at it that way, because now FIFA has put their hands off of this particular regulation, but has given the onus and the luxury of those national associations to still decide on these kind of regulations, because they can go above and beyond the limited standards that are given by FIFA. In my opinion, these are pretty much the major changes and the interesting points that you can find in FIFA. And yes, of course, you have to keep in mind that if you sign an agreement putting the national jurisdiction, you'll be stuck with the ordinary courts. But as an agent, via Article 58 of FIFA statutes, you always have an option of opting for CAS. And there will be ordinary proceedings, which is speedier. It's much more reliable, because you already know, you already would have predictions, because there will be thousands of jurisprudences you can refer to and see what CAS is thinking and dealing with. I think that
I would like to ask you, ma'am.
Yes.
Does one need to obtain a license or registration in order to work as an intermediary? And does an intermediary have the option of approaching the FIFA in case of a dispute?
So as I've said earlier, when there were 2008 regulations, you could reach FIFA after you have a decision from the National Association. But it was changed via the FIFA statutes. And when FIFA statutes changed the regulations and they gave exclusive jurisdiction to CAS, there is no way that you can really take any case directly to FIFA now. So you can either take it to national associations or you could just limit yourself to CAS.
Right. Thanks a lot, Apoorvi. That was extremely insightful. So my next question is for Santiago. Hi, Santiago. Are you there?
Yes, Steve, I'm here. Thank you very much for having me here. It's very early in the morning here in Ecuador, but it's a pleasure to be here. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have a nice ceviche after this. So happy to see you guys.
Thanks a lot for waking up so early. Right. So my question you two is, so Apoorvi has already touched upon it. So intermediaries cannot approach FIFA in the event of disputes. So which forum can they refer their matters to? So first, maybe it would be useful if you give us a general overview as to what happens in most parts of the world, and then maybe you could give us some examples regarding what happens in Ecuador or in other South American countries.
Okay. The position on regarding intermediaries is that every national association has the competence to follow or to have their own rules to make intermediaries follow the rules created by them. I know in Uruguay they have a special chamber that will take place and review all the subjects related to intermediaries, such as in Ecuador. I don't know if in Brazil they have it, but there's a special article that has to be, or clause that has to be involved in a contract of intermediaries that gives the opportunity to go to the Chamber of Player Statutes here in Ecuador only for subjects related to intermediaries. So yes, according to what Apoorvi said already, they will give you the opportunity to deal with all these cases inside your country.
Right.
But
right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Santiago.
Yeah, but
Please,
that's not necessarily going to be useful because when I talk about a country such as Ecuador, that it's a small country that we don't have many intermediaries. Most of the intermediaries are outside from outside Ecuador, so they're going to come to our country, to my country in this case. They will take the players, all the good players, take them out, and they're not going to register any contract inside Ecuador.
Right. So what is your advice then in such cases? Which forum should they, if there's a dispute between, say, a player and an intermediary, which forum could they think of approaching?
I prefer CAS also.
Right. Okay.
In my case, I have dealt with cases inside Ecuador. They are very difficult because the culture has not focused on sports law. So most of the intermediaries, most of the players doesn't know what are they signing, and also the people that are behind the desk trying to make a decision complicate all the process.
I understand. Yeah. I mean, it is quite similar in India as well, in the sense that registered intermediaries who are registered with the All India Football Federation can refer a matter to the Player Status Committee of the All India Football Federation, but we have very few registered intermediaries. So in many cases, intermediaries have to approach local courts, and I think Apoorvi mentioned this earlier. It is a very time-consuming process. So, and it can be very inconvenient to obtain a decision and then enforce it. Anyhow, over to you, Farhan. Maybe we should move on.
Moving further, I would move on to Tarun sir. First of all, I would really like to thank Tarun sir for making this session even possible. I would like to ask, sir, could you shed some light on the proposed amendments to the FIFA regulations pertaining to the intermediary?
First of all, thank you very much, Farhan. I hope I'm audible. Thank you for this opportunity. Thanks to your team at Law Essentials. Thank you to Deep and Apoorvi for coming up with such an innovative topic to talk on. Yes, very recently, not very recently, actually, it has been happening since 2018 that FIFA wants to come up with these proposed amendments. And these are still proposed, so let's see how they're going to be. Before I get to the specific 3-4, proposed amendments, I'm going to speak a little bit about what Apoorvi has already spoken as to the whole evolution of these of the FIFA regulations on intermediaries. So, as Apoorvi already mentioned, in 2018, it was known as the FIFA Players Agent Regulation, and which initially was a very, these were a very hardcore regulations in terms of they were strict. They had a very good regulation systems. License had to be obtained. There was an exam for it. Then the FIFA, player status committee was there, who had the jurisdiction to take care of things. Then in 2015, the word agent changed to intermediaries, and you had the FIFA regulations on working with the intermediaries, which somewhat, when I was looking at the regulations, were a little soft in their approach, because you did not have that license requirement coming in. You had multiple party representations, so a lot of conflict of interest situation was coming up. Then you have the national associations, which Apoorvi already and Deep also mentioned about, that the national associations got a lot of delegation, and the national association were taking care of the dispute resolution. I think Deep and other sports lawyers were here who are into the practical game of it, are better people to talk about the forum selection and how it functions. But yes, because we gave a lot of power, or we delegated a lot of power to the national association, a lot of problems started coming in. There are a number of proposed amendments that have come in, which FIFA is looking into. I think in 2019, FIFA had its football law review, 2018 in Zurich, and they gave a very long list of amendments that they want to bring in. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but there are there are a specific 4 or 5 of them which I want to shed a little light on. Number one is, the reintroduction of the licensing system, which is very important. Deep right now mentioned that there are very few people who are actually registered. I was reading one of the articles while researching for this webinar, and I got to know that only 15 to 16% of people intermediaries are getting themselves licensed, and which is a very sad state, is what I feel. So the reintroduction of the licensing system is something that FIFA is again getting into, and it's not going to happen. The licensing is not going to be a walk in a park, if I want to put it that way. They're coming up with a web-based examination. You have to get an examination done. If you qualify that examination, then only you get into this whole licensing procedure. Another one is, the professional liability insurance, which an intermediary has to take care of. Apart from that, they have to attend these professional courses on a daily, on an annual basis, which are very important to maintain their license. That is one, which is the licensing procedure. Another one is the inclusion of the FIFA intermediaries into the transfer market system, and it's majorly done because of the reason that all their whereabouts can be regulated by FIFA. So again, it's a very, very important step that FIFA is proposing to, that you bring in the intermediaries into the transfer market system. And while they're in the transfer market system, there are some rules and regulations that they need to follow. One is the updation. Whenever a transaction happens of which they are a party of, they have to do these regular updations on the transfer market system portal. That's very important. Another thing which has been a problem, which was a problem in the 2015 regulation, is the conflict of interest. And more than conflict of interest, it's about the dual representations of intermediaries. So now what FIFA is proposing is that an agent will be able to represent the engaging club and the player, in a particular transaction, but simultaneously he or she cannot be representing the player, the releasing club, or the releasing club and the engaging club. So you can't be having a number of party representation at one point of time. That is something which is very important, which FIFA wants to do. Apoorvi just mentioned, I think, about the FIFA, the commission cap. Now that is something that is very debatable in these proposed amendments, because of the reason that Generally, what Apoorvi already mentioned, that you got 10% to 12% of commission that a particular agent gets. I think Pranay is somebody who's going to, who's a better person to shed light on the, on the percentage of the commission. But now what FIFA is saying, that not more than 3% should be given. Now that has bring up a lot of issues for the agents, for the intermediaries. Number one is that a lot of people, and I'll speak about the Indian structure in this regard. It's about the livelihood of a particular agent or a particular intermediary. Now, how that is going to be impacted because of the 3% commission cap, I really want to look into. The good part right now is that these are just proposed amendments. FIFA is looking into how to bring about them in the main system, but it will be very interesting to see these new developments which FIFA is looking into.
Moving further, sir, I would like to ask, there seems to be a fair bit of controversy regarding the proposed amendments. Could you tell us about the legality of such amendments in the light of EU or other regulations?
More than focusing on the EU regulations and all, I think it's very important to understand that what I mentioned about the 3% commission cap, which is coming in. A lot of people now have stepped in talking about the livelihood issues of the intermediaries, because now you want to cap something. Maybe in a lot of transactions, people, there might be not huge transaction, and then the commission also gets really down. So somebody, imagine earning 10% from a particular transaction, is now going to earn somewhere around 3% or less than that maybe. So that is where the major issue is going to come into. There will, it's very interesting to see how this is going to happen. So majorly my focus, or something that I'm looking forward from these regulations, is how the livelihood of intermediaries are going to come into play.
Right.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request Deep, sir. Go ahead.
Right. I want to bring Victor in here. So, Victor, since you work for Santos, which is one of the biggest football clubs in Brazil, it would be great if you could firstly share with us what your views are regarding the proposed regulations, and especially regarding the cap on the commission. That's one. And secondly, maybe you could give us some inputs regarding what kind of challenges clubs face while working with intermediaries, because of course, as we all know, Brazil produces a lot of talented players, and there are a lot of intermediaries in the market as well. So what challenges do clubs face? What are the issues which you have yourself observed?
Hi everyone, thank you very, very much to Law Essentials team for this invitation, to Apoorvi for such an invitation. Guys, good afternoon. Look, my thoughts on regulations are the same of you, of Pranay, Apoorvi, and Tarun. FIFA shall regulate, we know that. The deregulation, they admitted that was a mistake. We can't expect that 200 federations regulate themselves in an international market. Ecuador, you have a few agents, Santiago, inside Ecuador. They are used to do international transactions. Why they are going to expect that Ecuador regulate their transactions? Why they are going to trust in Ecuador national system? They are going to submit their questions. They don't transact inside Ecuador exclusively. Of course, they do business in Colombia, Peru, Brazil, inside whole South America. So FIFA shall regulate this. That's, I think, common sense over here. Brazil, we are lucky that Brazil is a continental country, so we have a lot of agents. We have a lot of business to do inside the country. So we have a regulatory framework similar to that would be a good or an expected framework before FIFA. We have a default commission. If the parties don't adjust the commission, we have a default 3% commission. We have something avoiding multiple representations. We have a license to act as an agent. You shall have a license. We have a national DRC to solve our disputes, but this is too little, too little. The money flows in the international transactions. We need more. We need FIFA to support, to regulate. So I think this is the point number one. The point number two, speaking about the cap and our particular problems. The cap is controversial. You already said that. Why limit the free market? You shall have the free market is a rule. You shall have a good grounds to limit this. Why limiting the cap? Why establishing a cap? When you hire an intermediary to have a sponsor to your shirt to advertise something, in Brazil they establish a 15% cap to the agent that brings a sponsor to the team, for example, and other areas. In television, you want to broadcast and advertising, they pay commission freely. Why in football we have to limit that? FIFA has to show data, has to show numbers that they are afraid of money laundering, they are afraid that agents are particularly influencing in teams, in transfers and everything. They have to put more data to us to convince us that the cap is needed. But otherwise, in other hand, agent market has established itself a 10%. CAS has already suggested 10%. So 10% is a number that market is getting used to. Come on, 10% is reasonable, 10% is just, 10% is fair. Okay, let's go with 10%. So I think that FIFA will establish a cap at 10% and move forward. To go to our, to speak briefly of our problems over here, as you say, Deep, we have a lot of talented players. Clubs do not have a network, a proper network to identify these talents within the whole country. Inside São Paulo state, we have like good network. But when you go to the northern parts of the country, you don't have this network, but you still have talented players. So these players from very early ages, 89 years old, 7 years old, they already have their agents. They already have someone trying to allure them to a club or to a football school, hoping a future contract to give to a big club and have a boost. So we have to deal with agents from really minor ages. And this is, of course, this is not allowed in our national legislation, neither in our federation regulatory framework. But this is the reality. We can't close our eyes to reality. I can write everything in a paper. This is forbidden. We'll have shall have capital penalty on this. You will die if you agent a player of 8 years old. Still, someone will try to get a guy inside Tocantins, that is a northern state, to bring to another club in youth-based third division club, try to give their steps. So we can't close our eyes. This is something we face. Why not regulate this? Why not try to protect these minors too? It's very easy to forbid and to ignore the problem. So I think this is the goal with our federation. Try to regulate better, try to protect these minors, but do not ignore. These minors need agents, and Brazilian clubs need to deal with these agents if they want to hire the better talented players. Santos particularly do not have a problem over this because Santos brand is attractive. Come on, it's Pelé club, it's Neymar club, it's Rodrigo club. All talented players want to go to Santos. So Santos is in a comfortable situation over here. But other clubs, Atlético Mineiro, Fluminense, Ponte Preta, they need to deal with these agents. If they don't negotiate with the agents, if they don't pay commissions even, I'm just doing examples, okay, not speaking on concrete situations. I'm just illustrating, okay. They need to deal with the agents. They need to hire quality, talented players to their youth categories. I will return the ball to you guys. Thank you very much.
Right, Victor. That was extremely interesting. Quick question: we have already spoken about the dispute resolution system, how agents cannot approach FIFA. What happens in Brazil? You have an NDRC, or is there a separate sports arbitration tribunal which admits matters involving intermediaries?
Before 2016, the major issues concerning agents and clubs normally, because the clubs usually default, they're non-comply with their financial obligations towards the agents. It was normally solved in the national courts. Okay. As you said before, guys, it takes time. They are not specialized. From 2016 onwards, CBF, our national federation, established an NDRC. And this NDRC, in these last 4 years of existence, they build a kind of a trusteeship. They get the trust of the market. So okay. The market started to trust on them, to rely on their decisions. So they don't have the problem that you guys have in India of the federation decisions to be challenged on the court. This take a long time. Market, an incredible way. I should stop and look why Brazilians relied on a private court to solve their disputes. This is interesting. This is new to our culture. But the market, football market, started to rely on national DRC, and that is, of course, great thing. Their decisions are not going to be disputed. They are starting to mediate cases to try to solve disputes on a mediation basis, but their decisions are going to be enforced, and they have sporting sanctions. So we are trying to respect their decisions, to not challenge in the courts. And CAS, CAS is they have their credibility. They are specialized, but CAS is so much expensive, especially for Brazilian. It's so much expensive and so much distant. They have their Switzerland heads. They think that everything is like Switzerland. They don't know the reality of our countries. They don't know the disputes in Ecuador, how they have how details they face, the problems they have inside the country, the problems they have in Brazil. They schedule meetings at 9 a.m. of Zurich time. Come on. I have to wake up 3 in the morning to see what a Polish guy understands about Brazilian trouble. So we are getting used to resolve the problems inside our country and to rely less on CAS. And I particularly, that Manchester City decision this year, come on. So, but this is time for another panel, another debate.
Yeah. You don't seem to be a big fan of CAS, Victor. Anyhow, I wish we have a better NDRC in India soon. Anyhow, over to you, Farhan. We should move on.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a quick question coming up directed to you itself. To become a sports lawyer, are any specific professional courses recommended?
Okay, I don't want to talk too much about master's programs, but yes, there are quite a few LLMs or masters which you could pursue, which are a mix of sports law and sports management. There are various courses. Maybe whoever's asked me the question could drop me a text on LinkedIn, and we could discuss this in further detail.
Moving further, I would like to ask Pranay sir, what are the challenges that you generally face while working with clubs?
Again, Farhan, can you come again?
What are the challenges that you generally face while working with clubs, sir?
I think to get into India specific, I would say a lot of challenge would be in terms of communicating with the clubs. One of the reason what the sporting directors or the technical directors of any club, what they do is they don't easily come back to us. So giving you an example, for example, I have an Indian player and I send it across the profile of the player to the sporting director or the technical director of the club. It's for us to chase them again and again until to come a decision from the club. The club would not respond, let's say within 24 or 48 hours, whether they are interested to sign that player or no. So first and foremost, that's the difficult part, is to you have to chase them to get a response whether they are interested or no. I think in general, second sense would be a lot of clubs like to work with particular set of agents or intermediaries, as we call now. I think what the clubs have might be comfortable working with certain intermediaries. So it's difficult to crack sometimes deals with the club, which there will be a new sporting director or a new technical director. So that's something quite difficult, in my opinion, to crack a deal with the club where you are not that close or in the close groups of the technical director or the sporting director of the club. So these two things are quite relevant and are quite evident as well in the Indian football scenario, especially in the Indian Super League. So that's something very difficult to deal with. And the third thing is, for example, if a club is really interested in the player which you manage, they will try to close the deal within 48 to 72 hours, making sure they get the player and they get the best deal for themselves, rather than the player who might be able to use that deal to get a better deal somewhere else. So, I mean, these things are there evident in the market, especially in India, but hopefully, in the next couple of years, there might be a different scenario and there will be, these things won't be evident that much, which are currently in the market.
You manage some established professionals, as you mentioned, Indian national team players as well, and also some younger players who are playing in the second or third division. Could you tell us briefly about how you approach clubs? Does it depend on the player's profile, sir?
Farhan, you're not audible properly, sorry.
You manage some established professionals and also some younger players who are in the second or third division. Could you tell us briefly about how you approach clubs? Does it depend on the player's profile?
Yeah, I think yes, you're right. It depends a lot on the player profile. Uh, for example, if a player is playing in the ISL and is playing regularly, he would probably like to stay in ISL itself rather than going down, because rather than coming down to the I League. And but it's vice versa. For example, if a player is playing in I League and he has really had a good season in I League, so his profile would probably be more interesting to the kind of ISL clubs. But there are also number of factors which are involved. Is, for example, in terms of the age, in terms of the position of the player, because in ISL there is certain foreign player quota. Like this year, there are only seven foreign players which can be bought by any club, and most of the foreign players have been played in important positions like a striker or an attacking midfielder or a defender. You will not see a goalkeeper which is a foreign player in India. So most probably, if there is an Indian goalkeeper, he's more into the demand for any clubs, be it I League or the ISL. So it's quite important depending on the player profile. And in the lower down the divisions, you are looking at players who are young and hungry. Because keeping in mind that there is not that much money involved in the lower divisions in India, so it's more about getting that exposure and the opportunity. And usually the age of the players who would be playing in the lower divisions would be from 18 to 23, because they want to become a professional, they want to get into that system of starting to play at the national, at the professional level, and then moving up the ladder from second division to I League and then to ISL. So I think a lot depends on the player profile, a lot depends on the age of the player, because an I League club would sign a player probably in the motive of selling the player to the higher division clubs, which is the ISL in India, and making some transfer money out of it, because that's the only way they can make money. That's the only source of income for an I League club, is to sell the players to ISL. So depends on the age, the position, and whether the player has played the youth, the youth nationals for India or some national level tournaments. So profile is dependent, but there are also other factors involved in terms of pushing up the profile to any clubs in India.
Right, right. Pranay, quick question. So I know that you work with some clubs in the UK as well. So how is it different working with clubs in the UK and working with clubs in India? Is there any difference?
I think there are a lot of notable difference in my opinion by working in UK and India. One of the reasons is Indian football is still developing, whereas UK football clubs in UK has already developed. So the deals happen very quickly in UK, in terms of the clubs and the sporting directors acting in a very professional manner. But over here in India, as everyone is working in sports in India, you know that it's still not that organized. It's still a bit of unorganized in sports in India. So the biggest factor and the notable difference is the professionalism in terms of dealing. And whereas in UK, it's just not the sporting director involved, it's the chief executive, it's the lawyer of the club. So there are a couple of 3-4 people involved from the club side, whereas in India it's just the sporting director and the intermediary involved. Whereas over there, there's a big chunk of people who are trying to get the deal over the line, whereas over here there are only 2 people, in my opinion. That's the biggest difference in terms of professionalism in negotiating.
Yeah. Right. Thanks a lot for insights, Pranay.
No problem.
Okay, so my next question is for Apoorvi. So Apoorvi, I know that you have worked with several football players from different parts of the world. So could you tell us a bit about player intermediary relationships? Do they generally tend to have a cordial relationship, or are disputes very common?
So at a very general note, as Pranay rightly started this entire webinar, is that the job of an agent is multi, and there are way too many facets adjoined to it. So usual issues that would ever arrive once a player has decided that you are going to be my agent, it would depend on the performance, whether the player is satisfied with the performance of the agent or not. There are many instances where there are hefty representation contracts that are drafted between parties, and most of the times players would trigger those obligations one way or the other depending on the national laws, and they would seek to get out of the contract earlier.
Right.
Another usual instance which you would see very common is poaching. There are many occasions where there would be different either agents or clubs themselves with whom either the agent has been trying to contract the player into, and because there would be a commission involved some way or the other, the player is talked out of that representation contract. I mean, there will be instances where players are told that, maybe we could give you that 10% of the commission instead. I mean, that would save us, and it would be given to you on a weekly or monthly basis. So they are technically saving money for themselves. And that is how these kind of disputes end up at CAS or national associations. But at the end, bottom line would be that major number of disagreements at the end would involve financial transactions, that
Right.
there would be damages or compensation involved in those transactions, and which is not really very often of a practice when you talk about big players, because when you're talking about big top tier players, then you're talking about big uh, agents as well, and they know what they're doing. If they are not themselves doing it, their companies are doing it, and they make sure that they do not make they do not make a mistake, because they know if they do, those big players have a luxury of kicking them and going to the another one whenever they want to. There can be instances even in big level of plays where there will be poaching involved as well, and those poachings would be kind of like bribes given to players to build up relationships, which would be somewhere maybe an attractive endorsement deal, maybe an attractive sponsorship deal, maybe a better club that they have found for the player, and then the player would rethink of his agent and would want to get out of the contract. Typically, these kind of contracts last for a year, but agencies, companies like to have it for 3 years. But it's really very impractical, because at a smaller level, players keep on changing their agents, because at a lower level, as Pranay has again pointed out, players do struggle a lot. So for them, getting out of the contract and signing up a better deal is always going to be the first option. And of course, when we are talking about minors, we have to know that majority of the agents would probably be their guardians, their parents. And in order for an agent to get himself into those transactions, they have to make sure that the that the players' parents have trust in you as an agent. So you do not just have to convince the player himself, but also the parents. So you have a double duty of convincing the parties, which usually is a very tricky situation for agents. And I mean, at the end, we also know that for minor transactions, agents cannot get paid according to FIFA. So this is also second reason why most of the minor players would have parents as their agents, which is a problem, because they really do not know what kind of contracts they're dealing with. Sometimes they do hire lawyers, but most of the times they don't. And then again, it depends on the agents whether they take benefit out of these kind of situations or not. They can use these kind of gateways to build up their relationship with the players. But at the end, it's going to be a very personal relationship. And of course, if you are an agent and you're dealing with a player's everyday routine, dealing with his tenancy agreement to dealing with transfer agreements, everything which is which is expected out of you as an agent by a player, it's very important for you to also have a lot of legal knowledge, which is why the biggest of the biggest agents that you see either have great connections, because networking is important, but at the same time have good legal knowledge. If not good, at least the minimum standards are met. So yeah, I think this should give a light on how the relationship between agents and players work.
Yeah. Or what you said towards the end, either they should have good legal knowledge, or they should approach lawyers like us, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Over to you, Farhan.
Thank you so much,
Just
sir.
to sorry, Farhan, just to like add up to this line,
Sure.
that yes, it's
Sure.
really very common again that there are many transactions which land up on a very bad note, and then lawyers are referred to by agents. So it's very common for agents to mess up the agreement some way or the other, because especially when you're talking about transfer agreements, they're very technical. And this is the reason why I'm definitely in favor of FIFA to again like set limitations and set standardized rules which are much more stricter, because the duty of an agent, especially when he's representing a player, is much more higher as compared to representing a club.
Right. Thank you, Apoorvi.
I would further like to move to Mr. Santiago. I would like to ask him, so players usually sign representation contracts with intermediaries. Are there any restrictions regarding the duration of such contracts, or are there any other restrictions?
Yes, well, regarding the restrictions you say about the duration, it is established and known all over the world that it's 2 years, but there are some technical ways that you can use to avoid it. I know in some cases they give you they pay for your image rights, so they can be also owning your image right and extend the duration of this kind of contracts, because we're talking only about representation contract and not about uh, the manage of your image rights. For example, about the payment of commissions, we have discussed about this 10%, but I have worked with some special cases such as, and we were discussing about parents also. I remember one case when the intermediary was the owner of 10% that the player make, and the father of the player owner of the other 8%. So it was an 18% of all of the incomes of the players. So it's I can speak about different kind of situations that are unique here in South America, in Ecuador. I'm pretty sure Victor knows some of these very funny situations that you will have to read. About also the restrictions or any other things to have in mind is the time that you have to present the contract in your country, rather than is in Ecuador, Brazil, Uruguay.
Moving further, I would like to ask you, sir, what are the key issues which player need to be wary of while signing such contracts?
Well, here in Ecuador, in most of the cases, the intermediary will give you a very big amount of money for them to sell or to give them the authorization to represent the player. So that's a key issue that you, in some cases, I remember one case with one Brazilian intermediary that the player signed a blank paper in exchange of the authorization to work with the player. So it's very important. I know it's very difficult also to find lawyers or to pay for lawyers when you're starting your career, but there's a big list of things that you shouldn't do, and they are constantly done by the players.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request Deep sir to continue.
Right. So I just wanted to ask you if you can tell us in brief whether players, I mean, not just in Ecuador, globally, what is the practice? Do players generally pay a commission to intermediaries? And also, what kind of? I know Victor talked about 10%, but is that what happens in most parts of the world?
Yes, yes, it is. It is 10%. In Ecuador, if you have not established the 10%, it's 3%. So
Okay.
every intermediary will establish 10% as
Right.
a general rule. Okay,
Okay.
but then they will sell everything, the percentage of themselves, of a possible transfer, the 15% they have for a future transfer. So it's something that you will see a lot because of the lack of knowledge about regulations for the players, and in these cases the
Yeah.
intermediaries use it in favor of themselves.
Right. In India, transfers are not, although they're on the rise, it's not so, transfers are not very common. So usually players move only when they become free agents. what happens is with Indian Super League clubs, which is the top division, clubs generally pay a commission to intermediaries, which ranges between 5 to 10%. And sometimes intermediaries do not charge players when they're getting a transaction done between a player and ISL club. But when we move to the lower divisions, the second and third divisions, clubs rarely pay a commission to intermediaries for any transaction they get done. So in such cases, players, intermediaries do have to charge players some amount. Again, it ranges, it depends on their understanding with the player, but it's usually between 5 to 10%. Sometimes a bit more. Again, it depends. Right. So moving on, I want to ask a question to Victor. So we have already talked about commission, payment of commission by players to intermediaries. But it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about how intermediaries charge clubs. I mean, we are reading about big transfer deals all the time. So who pays the commission? Is it usually the selling club, the buying club, or both? And also, what kind of percentages and numbers are we looking at?
What you said before, right before, it was true. Here in Brazil, we're normally in the top division. The club pays the commission on behalf of the player, because normally the agent is a player agent. It's very rare. I don't remember any situation that we hired an agent to try to sell or to negotiate someone. We pay on behalf of the player. And the lower divisions, that difference that you said, it happens here too. The players rarely pay a commission. The clubs rarely pay a commission. So the agent charges the player normally in a percentage of the wages, over the wages. In the female football, this is more common. Because we don't have many transfers. It usually happens when they become free agents. So the agent usually charges the player in the new transaction. And usually is the hiring club or the buying club. Fee the buying club, or if the athlete, even if the athlete is a free agent, we usually pay a commission to the agent for that transaction.
All right. Okay. Over to you. Thanks a lot, Victor. Over to you, Farhan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would like to move further to Tarun sir again. Tarun sir, do you think players and intermediaries should be made aware of the pertaining legal issues in the current scenario?
Is Tarun with us?
Oh, yeah. So one was about specifically about, do players have to pay to the agents? I think the new regulations, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who's on the panel, I think the new proposed amendments which are coming in, I think FIFA is saying that now players have to directly pay to the commission to the agents, or to the intermediaries, I'm sorry. That is one of the things. And another thing which I think Victor might not like is that FIFA again is getting back the whole dispute settlement system with CAS. So that is something that, again is coming up in terms of the new proposed amendments. When you speak about that, how the legal education amongst players and intermediaries is important, I think Pranay started off really well when he said that it's a 360 career management system of an intermediary. And now when you have a 360 career management system, you're looking at number of things. It's not only about a particular transfer that is going to happen and how an intermediary is going to help or assist a player to go to a particular club or a desired avenue. It's also about a number of things. It's about media representations. It's about endorsements. So when you're touching a number of areas and very sophisticated areas, it's very important that players and intermediaries are absolutely clear about their roles and responsibilities and their rights. And this can only happen, Farhan, if you have a system which helps them understand the legal postulates that work. I'm only going to speak about the Indian system right now. When I look at the proposed amendments which have come in, let's just talk about the licensing system. you have a licensing system coming in. Let's just assume that these proposed amendments come into play. You've got a licensing system which Indian intermediaries have to follow. Now, if a particular intermediary coming from various sections of the society, various economic groups, various areas in the country, they're not very, well versed about what a license is or what a licensing system is, they're bound to make mistakes. And then under the Indian law, I think it's for every law that ignorance of law cannot be an excuse. Then, you go to lawyers, then you go to a number of other people to get your system in place. I think now, and I want to look into a number of, Indian regulators, the AIFF, because we're talking about the football. I want to look into some kind of score structure which the AIFF, or maybe any other regulator for that matter, comes up for its player and intermediaries, talking about that what are their legal responsibilities, what are their legal rights. And that is something that is the need of the hour. I think in one of my informal conversation with Deep, I was discussing one day that it's very important now that we come up with some kind of athlete and now intermediaries legal education programs. So it's very important.
Moving further, sir, I would like to ask what, according to you, are the initiatives that could be taken to increase awareness among parties in India?
I think these initiatives can be, various courses if you're launching in, and it cannot happen only through the regulators. We can't be pointing, fingers at the regulators. I think a number of other institutions, for example, I'm into academics and I can speak of, my university for that matter. I'm working right now on an athlete legal education program within the state of Gujarat. So a number of other institutions have to collaborate. You've got intermediaries, you've got players, you've got other administrators. And then you have to create a course structure maybe, or come out with these various symposiums and conferences and other online and offline education programs which help you develop these kind of legal understanding of your legal rights and responsibilities. You've got the Athlete 365, which is an IOC portal where you have some kind of courses. You've got the WADA, which gives you some kind of courses, but you have to understand, especially under the Indian system, that you're talking about a system wherein people come from various sects, as I've mentioned before. So the vernacularity, the simplification of these courses is an essential ingredient which one has to look into. You can't expect somebody coming from a very internal area in the country, not having, not that kind of, not formal education, but not having that kind of sophisticated education system to understand specific FIFA regulations. So you have to, simplify it for them. You have to make it very easy. You have to make it in terms of the Indian structure and then go forward with it.
Thank you so much, sir. I would ask Deep sir to take over.
Right. So in the next section, I think it would be useful if we spoke about the whole issue of intermediary registration. I mean, there are a few questions which I would like to ask. I mean, it's open for all the panelists. So firstly, is it compulsory to get oneself registered? Secondly, what are the benefits of getting oneself registered as an intermediary with the National Football Association? And also maybe we could talk about what the registration fee usually is and the number of intermediaries in different countries. The idea is to give our viewers a brief idea about how it works in different parts of the world. So maybe we could start with Victor. He could tell us about how things work in Brazil and also in other South American countries in brief.
Here in Brazil, the registration is compulsory. Okay. It's mandatory. I opened the CBF website. In the CBF website, we have a list, complete list. If I type any name, you can find it right now. I have here a list. I think I will say to you, an example, 200 intermediaries. I don't know how many they are, but 200 intermediaries. And the clubs are obligated to work with the intermediaries registered. If Santos, on behalf of Santos, I start talking with an agent that is not registered, that's not licensed, and that comes to media,
right?
Now I have a problem. especially because of the Santos name, top tier club. So they are going to use us as an example, and we are going to have a problem. So of course that is a benefit to the agent. I am licensed, I can work professional, I can be a professional, seem like a professional, and work with top tier clubs, for sure.
And do you know what is the fee amount which agents need to pay to get themselves registered?
I don't know the exact fee amount because I didn't work with that, but I can say that agents are required to have an insurance of kind of $20,000, kind of something like that they have to present in the moment they are submitting their registration.
Right, I understand.
To cover damages or losses, civil losses.
Right. Sounds great. Okay, thanks a lot, Victor. Maybe we could move to Santiago. Could you tell us briefly about Ecuador and other South American countries as well, if you're aware of what's happening in other countries?
Yes, well, there's a funny way to say it in Ecuador. The exam has a price of $5,000, and the excuse me.
Yeah. Please go on.
Okay, so the exam has a price of $5,000 to take the exam, and with 1,000 more, you get the complete the corrected exam. So there's a way to say it, because you can obtain the certificate with $6,000. You have to pay inside. That's part of the corruption, I would say. But we don't have as many registered intermediaries as Victor said in Brazil. I believe we have around 20. A lot of them, they don't want to register in Ecuadorian Football Federation because, as I was saying at the beginning, most of the intermediaries are from other countries, and they don't want to lose time or give the opportunity to have the confidentiality of the contract in Ecuadorian Football Federation. So we also have the opportunity to check them on the web page, but the web page is not working, so it's for nothing. So that's some of the things I can say about that. You have 20 days to register the contract, because of course it's an obligation, and well, that's how it is working here in Ecuador.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong. Most of the intermediaries working in the market are not registered.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
Correct.
Okay. So moving on, maybe Pranay, same questions to you.
I think there is a registration fee in India, which is approximately comes up to 50,000 plus taxes, comes to 59,000 rupees in India. So to just give a global context, it comes about 600 pounds, 600 UK pounds for a year registration, which you need to renew it year by year. But I mean, it's still evident in the market. There are a lot of unregistered intermediaries still able to crack a deal with the clubs. But clubs don't care if you are registered or no. Even if you're unregistered, they just want the player. They will sign it. They don't ask you for your license in India. Which is unfair on the intermediaries who are registered and have paid the registration fee.
Right.
There has to be some regulation by the All India Football Federation that the clubs can only work with registered intermediaries, so that we have more authenticity.
And maybe something similar to what happens in Brazil, like what Victor told us earlier. Clubs generally, at least the bigger clubs, refuse to work with unregistered intermediaries. So from what I know, there are only 15 registered intermediaries in India right now. So why do you think there are so few? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of points, but do you think maybe some people are not aware of the benefits of getting oneself registered? Is the registration fee too high? What are the reasons?
I think there are a couple of points. Number one is people are not aware that you need to be registered to negotiate and transact. Secondly, the club should also, when an unregistered intermediary approaches a club, the club should also inform them that we are not going to work with you. So, or the All India Football Federation should also inform the clubs not to work with unregistered intermediaries. And I think that the fee also is quite high, in my opinion, to what they are offering as well in terms of the services by the All India Football Federation. I feel they should have kept the fee a bit lower, in my opinion, because we are not getting 50 anything in return for 50,000 rupees, which we have been paying. As simple as that. I hope nobody from AFF is hearing.
No. Yeah. Santiago wants to come in, I think.
Yes. What is the in dollars in Ecuador we manage American dollars. 50,000 rupees are how many
You look
dollars?
around $800 with taxes. Around $800.
Okay. So yeah, it's because in Ecuador it's very expensive then to obtain this credential. Okay,
No,
thank you.
but I think I think
But then
for
you
a lot of
also get to
intermediaries,
cheat. Isn't it
Yeah.
that you also get to cheat in Ecuador? So you're paying for the cheating.
Yeah, of course.
no,
But
but I think please continue.
that's extra. The cheating is extra. It's not for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 1,000 extra.
Yeah. Comes
No,
with the
like
solution.
yeah, from my experience and from what I've understood after speaking to various intermediaries, the thing is, I mean, we have a very small market in India. We have only 10 clubs now, maybe 11 clubs in the top division, and then 10 more in the second division. So there are only 20 odd clubs you can work with. So paying, even $700 or so per year is not a very feasible option for a lot of people. So if you draw a comparison, in the UK, the intermediary fee is £500 per year, if I'm not wrong. So in India, they're charging more, and in the UK, you have like hundreds of clubs. I mean, there are at least 3 or 4 not professional divisions, but I mean there are many clubs. In India we have 20, so it is something which needs to be looked at, I believe. All right. And Apoorvi and Tarun, could you maybe speak about any other country, some other Asian or European country, and tell us how the system is like?
Can I speak?
Yeah, sure, Apoorvi, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think I can speak about some special cases in Europe. In France, for example, even after the 2008 regulations were changed, France kept
Yeah.
the idea of having a test. And
Okay.
if you have to become an intermediary, you have to give a test. And
Right.
while giving a test, you always have to click on either of the categories that they have for citizenship. So you can either click on the category that you're a French citizen if you are, or if you are a citizen of EU, or if you are a non-EU citizen. So you have to distinguish your status within your registration. I'm not really sure on a practical basis how this really affects the registration in France, but that was it was taken as a actually positive point that at least they're recognizing the existence of EU state members and non-EU state members, which was not the case for Italy. Italy had discriminatory regulations earlier and they continued with it. And I think that recently they've changed it. But earlier, only Italians could get registered. So they were discriminatory, even in the sense of being within the European Union territory. So yeah, these two jurisdictions are very unique. But yeah, of course, as I said, registration is important. I think for UK, if you are a foreign, you can still register. But if you're registering, then you only have 10 days to finish your transaction. That is a limitation that's given by the UKFA. That was just one additional point. If Tarun has. Okay.
Yeah, not any specific jurisdiction. I think everybody here is better people to comment on the jurisdictional issue. But what you mentioned, Apoorvi, is absolutely correct. That because of registration, and I think Pranay is somebody who's in the business who might back me up in this. That you get a number of other safeguards. You get a system in place which sometimes is not there. And at the end of the day, look, you are a person who's going to take care of interest of a person who has put all his his professional growth in life, and he or she is dependent on you. So if you don't have a system in place in terms of registration, I think the market after a point of time is going to become havoc. Of course, things like what Pranay mentioned about the higher fee, that can be looked into, because of the reason that what Deep was mentioning is absolutely important. That in India you've got 20 odd clubs. The transfer fee or the transfer system is, or not the transfer system, but the transfer fee that you get is not really high, and the commission because of that is not going to be very high. And then you're expecting somebody to pay somewhere around 60,000 rupees a month, a year. I think is a huge deal. So these are things which maybe the regulators can look into, but absolutely important is registration. I think you have to make a very sophisticated system to take care of this registration process.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone. Farhan, I think we are almost out of time, so maybe we could start the Q&A session with the attendees.
Surely, sir. We have the first question coming in from Akash. How do the dynamics of...
Sorry, Farhan, sorry to interrupt you. Just I think Pranay just informed me that he has some urgent matter to take care of, so he needs to leave.
All right, guys. Sorry, I need to rush, guys. Good catching up with you, and hopefully stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Maybe if someone asks a question for Pranay, we can email it to him. Right?
Yes,
Farhan?
Definitely. Question, Farhan, just and email it to me. I'm happy to respond by tomorrow. Okay. Perfect. Right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Bye.
I would like to move back to the question that we were discussing. We have the first question coming in from Akash. How do the dynamics of agents in the NBA or other closed leagues differ in comparison to open leagues like the Premier Leagues or the La Liga with respect to commissions, regulations, licenses, etc.?
Well, I think today's talk was fully about football, so I personally cannot answer this question today for sure. Maybe we can have another webinar on basketball and then we can get back to this. But at a personal level, if Akash wants, he can approach us and we can get back to him in 2-3 days with some answers.
Right. I mean, I think he's asking about what the difference between closed leagues and open leagues are. When we talk about football, I don't think there's a huge difference, to be honest. I mean, if we compare the Indian Super League, which is a closed league, to say any other league in the world, which is an open league, I don't think there's much of a difference. I mean, it really depends on the country, to be honest. I mean,
except for
Deep, I totally
no, but except for NBA, although it's a closed league, it's still part of the Olympic movement because they have signed a agreement with the FIBA, International Federation of Basketball.
Right. I was trying to draw a comparison between. I was trying to draw a comparison between.
It's the only exception
in football. Not other sports. In football, I don't think there's much of a difference.
Yeah, if you compare Bundesliga with La Liga, there isn't much. Bundesliga is a closed league, right?
No, Bundesliga is not a closed league. As far as I'm okay.
ISL is for sure, but I think Bundesliga is a closed league.
I think Victor wants to pitch in.
No, I just agree with you guys. I think there's no distinction with an agent work before a closed league or an open league. I think their work don't change It's by the regulations, of course.
Yeah, except for agents would have unions in closed leagues because they sign collective bargaining agreements. So they have, in my opinion, they have much bigger rights within closed leagues as compared to open, where you have to, at least for FIFA, like you have to restrict yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's well organized.
Yeah.
I think we have the next question from Shari.
Yeah.
So, do you think FIFA is corrupt? For example, the World Cup 2022 happening in Qatar.
Can I take that question?
Yeah, sure. Go for it, Tarun.
I think, I'll just say one line to you on this question. There's a very famous book written by David Kohn, and you should read the book. It's called the Fall of the House of FIFA. I think this question can be answered by that book. In a straight way. There have been a number of issues in the FIFA house in terms of its corruption. Not only the 22 World Cup, but a lot of other issues have happened in terms of giving the game rights to a particular country, so on and so forth. But read that book. That book is very, very important for somebody who wants to look into the corrupt practices of FIFA. It's called The Fall of the House of FIFA. The author is called David Kohn.
You can also look into the case of Sepp Blatter when he was accused of corruption.
On Sepp Blatter. It's the whole Sepp Blatter issue. But you should read that case. It's a very important case.
Yeah, everything changed in FIFA after that. UEFA Financial Fair Play, Ethics Committee, Auditing Committee, everything was established after all this. And of course, they're still struggling. You can't really call them corrupt per se on their face because it's an ongoing process for every organization, although you have to still commend that FIFA is indeed one of the most regularized sporting organization amongst all in the world. So they're still trying. But yeah, I mean, mistakes happen. And although the Qatar situation was very well contested because of human rights, but then you have to also give leeway to Qatar government that they changed their regulations, labor regulations after that.
I think it's for Pranay, and Pranay is not there.
But we'll still take the question up, sir.
Yeah.
India has a significant football transfer market these days, and it's a fact we have very few licensed intermediaries. Then who has been taking care of transfer deals all along?
Yeah, I mean, I will try to answer this in brief. There are several unregistered intermediaries. I personally know at least 20, and they are doing a pretty good job. But for one reason or the other, they cannot get registered. Usually it's because, again, I'm not saying this. What I understand is the registration fee is too high and they don't really see any benefits. See, what happens is when there's a dispute, if you are a registered intermediary, you can take the matter to the All India Football Federation Player Status Committee. And to be honest, till 2-3 years back, not so many disputes were happening. ISL clubs generally were paying whatever fees they owed intermediaries. Now things are changing, and I'm sure. So what happens right now is when there's a dispute, intermediaries get registered. All right. So it's like once bitten, twice shy. That's what's happening right now. But again, from what I'm hearing, the All India Football Federation is trying to become stricter with intermediaries. They want to regulate the industry because right now it's unregulated. There are 15 intermediaries. I'm sure there are at least 100 intermediaries who are working in the market. So let's see how it goes. Maybe they will impose some restrictions upon clubs, similar to what Victor mentioned regarding what happens in Brazil. So we'll wait and see. One thing we need to understand is in India, the football industry is still at a developing stage. So these kind of changes, we will start to see these kind of changes once things become a bit more professional and organized. That's pretty much it.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Will All India Football Federation hear a dispute of a registered agent that wasn't registered at the moment of the dispute? Will they hear this? They don't.
They don't. I have had a case where an unregistered intermediary approached me, and then we tried to, get himself registered. but they denied. They were like, no, I mean, when the dispute arose, he was not registered. We are not going to admit the matter. So subsequently, my client got himself registered, but I mean, for that matter, we had to approach local courts, and we are now going to wait for, I don't know, 2 to 3 years to
receive
to
the money.
decision. Yeah.
I think the next question from Akash: how do football agents regulate the conflict of interest between their own clients? Say, for example, if an agent represents Gabriel Jesus and Fred.
I think this is for Victor to answer.
And this is such a gray area. These agents fight each other all the time. That's something I personally don't like, because we as lawyers, we are colleagues. We try to collab each other, but agents normally, sorry if Tarun compliments my answer after this, but agents are used to fight each other. They don't try to collab. Come on. So that's the mutual representation is a problem, already a problem. And when an agent represents two players and the players start fighting, it's normally that a player revokes that representation, goes towards another agent. They change agents a lot. It's not something. Go on, Tarun, move forward.
I think FIFA should look into this matter as well in these new proposed amendments, because you've got the dual representation issue coming up, but I think as per my research, I did not see anywhere where FIFA could answer this question. It's definitely a very gray area, as Victor mentioned. But I think that is one of the ways agents behave, as if you give that particular client to some other agent so that that conflict of interest doesn't happen. But it's important. I think FIFA should look into that as well. I haven't looked into any regulation which takes care of this. I'm not very sure if anybody else.
No, there is Article 8 in the working with intermediaries regulations by FIFA, which talks about conflict of interest. And what they suggest is that if in case you think that you will have a conflict of interest, then you have to outrightly state it when you're getting yourself registered. And secondly, the conflict of interests, which are like outrightly recognized, is that the agent does not have a clear contract or a link to any of the national associations, federations, clubs. With if in case they are representing a player and XYZ. So they are, I think, in Article 5 or Article 6 of the same intermediary regulations.
I think, Akash, you can look into these two regulations which Apoorvi just mentioned. That might give you a clarity as to what the whole situation is.
Right.
I think we have the next question from Dipanshu. Does it affect your approaching power if you are not registered as an intermediary anywhere in the world?
Is Santiago with us? Or?
No, sir.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, okay, so I'll just briefly answer this question. It depends, like it depends on how the system works. I think we have heard about how things work in Brazil. Intermediaries find it very difficult to work with clubs if they are not registered. At least the top clubs would not want to work with them. As compared to that, in India, it doesn't matter so much. Clubs would work with anyone. I think Pranay talked about this. As long as the player has a good profile, they would work with anyone. So players generally don't care much, but it depends. Nowadays, I think players are also becoming a bit more aware. So they prefer to work with registered intermediaries. So I'll tell you one issue I got to know about a couple of months back. So there's this very young player. He's around 19 years old. I had helped him with a disciplinary matter in the past. So he contacted me and he was telling me that apparently he was approached by an agent who promised to get him a trial with because this player he's playing for a state league, which is a local league. So he wants to play in the I League or in the ISL. He was approached by an agent who promised to get him a trial with an I League or ISL club, and he wanted to be paid around 5,000 euros for the trial, 5 or 10,000 euros for the trial, a pretty substantial amount, which is not generally how it works. So there is quite a lot of corruption, especially when you look at smaller leagues and you look at players who don't have a lot of exposure, who don't really know how the system works. So nowadays we are trying to do our bit and raise awareness. But of course, I mean, being a practicing lawyer, I cannot reach out to football players across the country. But I think if they become players, we can make players a bit more aware. They would rather work with registered intermediaries. Yeah, I think I've been able to answer the question.
I think this question is particularly for Tarun, sir. What are your views on the great agent reluctance to comprehend the introduction or reintroduction of more time-consuming process that don't help the agents but hinder them?
I don't know what Amir is specifically speaking of, which kind of process, but if he's speaking about, let's just say, the licensing process, of course, it's a two-way process. The regulators who are introducing such systems have to keep the whole system very speedy so that the time consumption or any other issue doesn't happen. But look, at the end of the day, it's a system. It might have a lot of flaws. You have to bear with it, but it's an evolution process. One can't do a lot of things about it. But of course, if as an individual, you have some kind of inputs for a particular system which is time consuming, I think any regulator out there is going to hear it and get things in place. So that is something a lot of people, I think with the Indian courts, that's a major issue. But at the end of the day, you still go to the courts to get your things done. So I think that's how it's a part and parcel of the system.
I totally agree. It's an evolution process.
Yeah. We have the next question to the speaker, Victor. How challenging is it to foster a relationship with a football player in Brazil, where they have been made and treated like fetish? Thanks for the session.
It's usual over here. That's a common story. If you want to have a talented player, 11 years old, 10 years old, but that the guy that's the best in the city, the best in the village, you have to hire him to represent you. You shall go onto their parents and give money. Then another agent will say, no, come on. How did he get that Jew, that great player, that great talent? I will give more money to the parents. The parents are going to hire not the more money, but the agent that reaches them with a white Mercedes. So the first investment of any agent that wants to allure young kids is to have white Mercedes or white BMW. So they get in the house, wow, this is the guy, this is the agent. I don't care how much money he will put into my kid. He has a white Mercedes. And the eyes of the kid bright. Wow, I will have this one as a player. Yes, sign with me. In 2 years, you'll have one of this. But this is a popular story. We know that the market is getting more professional. And again, we need to have a regulation to minors. We don't have to close our eyes and say, no, minors don't have agents or don't need agents. They need agents to get the best clubs.
We have the next question from Asrar. What is your opinion of the panel on Manchester City versus UEFA case?
I think we need to conduct another session to just discuss this and talk about other controversial cases as well. Maybe we could move to the next question. Asrar, maybe you could write to us, because this is not really related to what we are discussing today.
This is the final question for today. What is your opinion on Ballon d'Or called off this year due to COVID-19? Is it the right decision?
I think that this is going to be specific only football discussion and not anything related to the legality of it.
Is this the last question? So maybe we could take it. Okay, so maybe,
Yes.
I mean, it's not like, what do you think, Tarun? Just to wrap things up.
Of course, I feel bad that the Ballon d'Or is not happening anymore. But these are situations wherein you can't do a lot of things. I think giving Ballon d'Or to somebody, there are other issues that one has to take care of. I'm really happy that at least sport has resumed. Forget about the Ballon d'Or. At least football has resumed. You're seeing a lot of matches happening. The Champions League is. I'm sorry. The English Premier League has started. The La Liga has started. I think that's a great step that has happened, and I think one step at a time. I'm sure the Ballon d'Or is also going to happen later in the year.
I personally feel that Lewandowski got robbed. It's super unfair.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was really a pleasure having
Yes, thank you
the
so
whole
much,
panel
Apoorvi.
with
Thank
us today. It
you.
was really a pleasure having you all. The audience has really loved you throughout the course of the session.
Thanks a lot, guys. It was a lovely session. Hope to see
Thanks,
you all soon.
Yes, thanks. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks, Farhan.
Thanks, Apoorvi.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye bye, guys. Thank you very much.